I'm live. I'm in here. Thanks to everybody who's been tuning in to the Upjab podcast here on Calix Boxing and over on Twitter. I'm up to 720 subscribers on Twitter. Thanks for all the love and support over there. And thank you to everybody who's been subscribing here on the YouTube channel. The archive views have been good. And I'm closing in now on, 5,000 subscribers. So I appreciate all the love I've been getting there. Came back about a year ago with 1,500 subscribers, so picked up another 3,500 in the past year. So things have been going good, and I appreciate the support. And I'll be shooting over daily content, whether on Twitter or over here on YouTube. So I appreciate all the support. And I wanted to give my thoughts, my overall thoughts on Fury, because I gave a 2-minute video on Twitter, nothing on YouTube yet. And I'll be on the podcast. I'll be over there, and shout out to my guy, wheelchair man, John Tyson Fury, head and shoulders above everyone else. And I agree. And there's one guy out there that I watch in the heavyweight division. I've been watching for a while since he moved up to heavyweight. More on that in a minute, but I think that guy could give Fury problems if Fury were to continue to fight and not retire. But I will be on the roundtable with D-Style Boxing tonight and his whole crew, HCP. So check that out, 7:30 Central. I'll be on at 8:30 Central to give more thoughts on Fury and Whyte and the whole fight and Fury's legacy overall. But I wanted to touch on that here more in length because I have a lot of respect for Fury. I've been saying since 2013, 2014 on this channel that I really don't see, when Tyson Fury is right, I don't see a heavyweight out there that can beat him. I was one of the few people who picked Fury to beat Klitschko going in. So I've never picked against Fury. Fury's just a handful. And Emmanuel Stewart said it before when Emmanuel Stewart was training Vladimir Klitschko. He would see Tyson Fury in the gym and say, this guy's a problem. If this guy keeps his head on straight, he's got all the attributes of a great fighter. And Tyson Fury, all these years later, has proven to be that guy. What makes him an issue is you say, okay, he's a guy 6'9". That guy that size is not supposed to be moving laterally, not supposed to be fighting off of his back foot that way. He's not supposed to have footwork the way he has the footwork, and he's built like a muffin top. So he's 6'9", he's built like a muffin top. He does not look the part, but he's got the athletic attributes of a guy half his size. Light-footed, can fight off the back foot, can fight laterally, can throw the jab. The guy's got all the boxing abilities, got the versatility, but on top of that, because you see a lot of boxers and you say, okay, what happens when you touch their chin? Tyson Fury went 25 rounds with the biggest puncher in the world. So that's what I said coming into the Dillian Whyte fight is, look, if Deontay Wilder does not knock out Tyson Fury in 25 rounds over 3 fights, nobody in the heavyweight division will. There's not a man alive that will knock this guy out within 12 rounds of boxing. That guy does not exist. If Deontay Wilder couldn't do it in 25 rounds, I don't want to hear anything about setting up punches. Oh, I had people telling me, oh, Dillian Whyte can set up punches better than Deontay Wilder. No. First of all, no. But second of all, Deontay Wilder was able to set up punches against Tyson Fury several times within those 3 fights and did not knock Tyson Fury out with those flush shots he caught him with. Knocked him down multiple times in the first fight, knocked him down in the third fight. Still was not able to get him out of there. So if he wasn't able to do it, nobody else is able to do it. The other issue that Whyte had was if you're not able to knock him out, you have to somehow figure out a way to beat this guy 7 rounds, get 7 rounds off of him in a 12-round fight. You have to be able to take his punches as he's fighting off of his front foot, sitting on punches, and beat this guy over 7 rounds. And Dillian Whyte was never going to be able to do that. He was just not able to pull. He's not the guy to be able to pull that off. And I don't see a guy out there except possibly one guy. More on that in a minute. But the thing that makes Tyson Fury special, and one thing I like about him as a fan, is he's able to morph himself into whatever he has to be on that particular night in order to win that particular fight. right? So Deontay Wilder, the first fight, he fought off the back foot, used a lot of lateral movement, still beat Deontay Wilder, but had more issues doing it. So what did he do? He decided to morph into a front foot fighter in the second and third Deontay Wilder fights and was able to beat a guy in Deontay Wilder at his own game. Nobody had been able to beat Deontay Wilder in that fashion, beat Deontay Wilder at all, but to do it in that fashion, to beat the dragon by spitting fire. That's what Tyson Fury did in the second and third fights, morphed into from a front foot fighter, back foot fighter in the first fight to a front foot fighter in the second and third fights, and bullied the bully. That's what makes Tyson Fury special, is he can beat guys with their strengths, beat them at their own game, but he can also take advantage of their weaknesses. He can fight off the back foot if he has to. He can throw punches going back, still with power. He can parry you with the jab. And what did he do against Dillian Whyte? Obviously, him and Sugar Hill did their homework like always. They saw that this guy is prone to uppercuts. Knocked out twice, both by uppercuts. So what did they do? They waited a little while, boxed him. And once those legs started to go, he sat on some punches. He shadowed him. He threw those two jabs. Boom, boom. Just slight jabs. Blinded Whyte and then shot the uppercut straight up the middle. Knocked him out. And that's Fury. He's able to look at the game plan and execute it. And the game plan coming in was to wait Whyte out a little bit and then sit on those uppercuts. And that's what he did. And he knocked him out, knocked his tooth out with the uppercut as well. It was just a short uppercut. It didn't look like much. It didn't even look in real time like he caught him flush. But if you watch the slow motion replay, you see the tooth flying up in the air, and Whyte was done. That was it. He can talk about Fury pushing him and all that. He was done. He was done. And if he wasn't, he was going to be done shortly after that. And that's what makes Fury special, is he's able to execute multiple game plans. It just depends on what he has to be from that night. He needs to fight a back foot fight. He's going to fight a back foot fight. He needs to be careful and beat you over 12 rounds. He'll do that, much like he did against Vladimir Klitschko. If he has to bully the bully, fight on the front foot like he did against Deontay Wilder twice, he can do that. He can sit on his punches with power. Or like I said, he can parry you with jabs. He can throw straight shots. He can throw uppercuts from the inside, even with long arms. Guy's got it all. He's got it all. But Dillian Whyte was never going to beat him. Dillian Whyte's a good fighter. We all saw what was going to happen coming in. Dillian Whyte was a big underdog for a reason. He's a good fighter, but levels. All right. So going forward, what do you say with Tyson Fury? And as boxing fans, much like sports fans, we can't enjoy the moment, right? As soon as Tyson Fury wins the fight, all of a sudden we're talking about what does he do next? He can't be serious about retirement. Is he going to fight for Undisputed? And then we go even further. How does he stack up with other heavyweights? And part of this is due to what Tyson Fury said after the fight when he said that he's the greatest heavyweight of all time. So let's take this bit by bit. What is Tyson Fury's legacy right now? Well, it all depends on what happens going forward. If he finishes undefeated, right, after fighting in front of 94,000 fans, knocking out Dillian Whyte, he secured his legacy as a great fighter, first ballot Hall of Famer, yes. True. But there's levels, once again. There's levels of great fighters. There's levels of special fighters. And Tyson Fury right now, to me, he has to keep fighting in order to climb that ladder. When we talk about top 10, even top 20 heavyweights, let me ask you something. How many of those great heavyweights at the top of their game would have retired a fight away from Undisputed? How many of them would have stepped away from the sport knowing that a possible $40 million fight, because he made $33 million for Dillian Whyte. Imagine what he makes for Alexander Usyk, fighting in front of almost 100,000 once again at Wembley Stadium. 40 million? Does he make 40? So how many of those great heavyweights throughout history, all-time great heavyweights, step away from a $40 million payday for all the marbles Undisputed in boxing? So does that take away from his legacy if he were to step away? Does that take away from his legacy? These are the questions that are being asked and need to be asked, because if Tyson, and I'm nobody to say when a guy should retire or not, but when we're doing all-time rankings, we need to take this stuff into consideration, correct? I just wish he was more reliable. Yes, and that's what we're talking about. Shout out to Chicano Prophet also in the building. The things that go against Tyson Fury when we talk about compare and contrast to other great heavyweights all time. The inactivity, stepped away from the sport due to his mental health for a while. Only 33 fights. Reliability wasn't necessarily there. But also, if he were to step away now, it's almost like you're reading a book and you know there should be another chapter in the book, but the author decides, no, we're going to cut it short now. That's what this feels like to me if Tyson Fury were to step away after the Dillian Whyte fight. Right? I mean, the final chapter should be for all the marbles, Undisputed. And you know it's there. The final chapter is there. It's all set up now. You did your part. You have to wait for Usyk and Joshua to do their part and figure it out. All you have to do is sit back and wait, but you know that other chapter has to be there. In the boxing story, and we got to talk about this a little later because I know you're going to be on the round table as well. I just don't agree with this all that good. To me, there's a difference between better and greater, and we'll talk about that later. And that's what I think people are getting confused with Tyson Fury is when I watch Tyson Fury fight, I say that guy can do well, match up well against all the great heavyweights of all time. And the reason I say that is size and what he can do with that size. And he's one of the big heavyweights. When we talk about the all-time great heavyweights, he's one of the biggest of them all, biggest size. And he can move like these guys, and he can sit down with power punches, and he's got a chin to back it up. So when we match him up against small heavyweights like Marciano, Joe Louis, Smoking Joe Frazier, you say, I wonder what he could do with that size. I wonder what he could do with that. I wonder if he can be better on that particular night with those fighters, come up with a game plan. However, when we talk about greatness, he doesn't stack up with those guys, and it's because of resume. You have to have the resume to back it up. And Tyson Fury doesn't have the resume to back that up. For one reason, it's this. It's reliability. He just wasn't a reliable fighter throughout his career, throughout the whole of his career. Also, it's the lack of other all-time greats in his era. One thing we should all agree on is Tyson Fury is the best heavyweight of his era, right? And it all depends on what you consider the era, but I think he's the best fighter, best heavyweight of his era. But once you get outside of his era with other great heavyweights, once you go into the 90s, the 80s, when you talk about Larry Holmes, when you go into the 90s and talk about other fighters, the Evander Holyfields, the Mike Tyson of the 80s into the 90s. When you talk about Lennox Lewis, 90s into early 2000s, when you talk about all these guys, how does he match up with those guys? And he doesn't match up with those guys yet as far as a greatness factor because he doesn't have a thick enough resume. He doesn't have the names on the resumes of those guys. If you don't believe me, go to BoxRec, pull up Tyson Fury, print it out, print out Lennox Lewis, put them side by side, and you'll see what I'm talking about. The names aren't there. So he's not up there with Lennox Lewis. He's just not. Not yet. If he wanted to be, if he was that concerned with legacy, he would talk about continuing to fight. And that's what I talk about as far as mixed signals with Tank Davis. Tank Davis says that he wants to be a pound-for-pound great, but he doesn't back it up with actions because he doesn't go in there with the top competition. Fury's been going in there with the top competition up to this point. At some point throughout his career, he's faced the top heavyweights, except for the winner of Usyk versus Joshua. And to me, in order to complete that book, in order to climb notches when you're talking about all-time great heavyweights, he has to fight that fight. He has to. Um, and look, I'm not going to tell a guy when to retire. If he wants to retire, that's on him. I'm not. As a boxing fan, I appreciate what he's done up to this point. I'm just talking about as far as a greatness factor. If you want to climb, if you want to call yourself the greatest heavyweight of all time, you got to fight the undisputed fight. You have to. And he's not the greatest heavyweight of all time, like he says, and he's not going to be. But at least he can climb those rankings, those mythical rankings, if he were to fight the undisputed fight. You have to fight the undisputed fight. And it makes me wonder. It makes me wonder. Tyson Fury end of career is like the final season of Game of Thrones. A lot of them, right? Like the Sopranos. A lot of it's hard to end a great show great, right? Like it's hard to most of the great shows limp to the finish line, 99% of them. But you have some great shows like The Wire and a couple other ones that they sprint through the finish line. And that's what I like to see Fury do. If he wins undisputed, he sprints to the finish line. But this seems like a limp to the finish line. It's like, okay, I'm done here. Like I said, it's like an author ending the book a chapter premature. And we all know the author ended the book a chapter premature because it was culminating, and then it just stops. No, man, you gotta climax here. Larry Holmes would outbox Fury if they fought. I tend to think that as well. But what I'm saying is the difference between better and greater is when we think about those fights, it's one given night. And we know what we know about Fury is he can morph himself into whatever fighter he needs to be for that particular night because he has versatility. He has the chin, he has the boxing ability, he has athleticism, he has the size to sit on punches, fight out the front foot as well. It's not often you see a guy with that size, with that athletic ability. It's almost like watching LeBron James play basketball or Shaq run the floor. You're like, those guys that size are not supposed to be doing that. And you say the same thing about a 6'9" guy, 270, built like a muffin top. You're like, he's not supposed to be boxing like that. He's not supposed to be throwing a jab. He's not supposed to be that light on his feet. So that makes him special. And when we talk about Fury, he's one of the biggest size-wise heavyweights when we talk about the all-time great heavyweights. So you do these mythical matchups and you say, I think stylistically, he's got a shot in these fights. But when we talk about greater, there's a bigger gap because he doesn't have the resume that those guys have. He just doesn't. And that's why you lean Larry Holmes when we talk about what would happen if these guys got in the ring with each other, because guys like Larry Holmes, George Foreman, these other all-time heavyweight greats, they backed it up in big fights against other great competition, other all-time great heavyweights. Tyson Fury hasn't done that because he hasn't fought any other. Well, he's fought one in Vladimir Klitschko, an all-time great heavyweight, and he did well in that fight. And I'm of the thinking that he would have beat Vladimir Klitschko at any point in Vladimir Klitschko's career. Prime versus prime, I take Fury over Klitschko head to head. But I tend to agree with this. He ain't retiring. I think he's using it for leverage. Just my opinion. Marciano and Frazier are bad matchups for him, and he would not get those guys off of him. Possible. And those guys would dig to the body for sure, especially Frazier would dig to the body. Frazier was merciless. Larry Holmes would put Fury on the ground like he did Jerry Cooney. Possible. In all fairness, all a fighter can do is beat the best that are around. Yeah. But that's the point of what I'm saying is he's got a guy out there in Alexander Usyk. And that was leading to my point I was about to make is I wonder if Fury would have the same energy about retiring and walking away if Joshua had those 3 belts right now. And the reason I think that is I watched the Joe Rogan interview he did with Tyson Fury a couple of years ago where he said that Steve Cunningham, USS Cunningham, was his toughest fight to date. And the reason that Cunningham was his toughest fight to date was Cunningham was a smaller, quicker fighter. He couldn't see Cunningham's punches coming, especially early in the fight. He couldn't figure out what Cunningham was doing. It was tough for him to find Cunningham in there. It was tough Cunningham was catching him with shots that he couldn't see. And Cunningham put him on the canvas in the second round. So I wonder if he's going to fight a smaller heavyweight like Usyk who can move. Fury has never seen anything like Usyk. A smaller guy who's going to find his way on the inside, be able to fight with his hands free, be able to keep up the same output through 12 rounds. Excellent boxer. And coordinated. He's got everything. Usyk has everything. So you wonder if Fury's size would give Usyk too much problems, or would Usyk give Fury issues, particularly early in the fight. And that's why I wonder, like, is Fury thinking, you know what, I just don't want to deal with Usyk at this point in my career. I just don't want to deal with it. And that's why he's stepping away, because Undisputed matters. And it's mattered to great heavyweights before. So when I see Fury say all of a sudden that the belts and Undisputed don't matter to him, I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if I believe that. Undisputed is a must if it's right there. Historically, it matters. And I tend to agree with this, man. Like, I don't know. I think his energy would be different. His energy would be different if it was Joshua and not Usyk. And I think he knows that Usyk is going to beat Joshua again. In my mind, I know Usyk is going to beat Joshua again, because I just don't think, after watching that first fight, Joshua can deal with Usyk. I don't know of any adjustment that Joshua can make from the first fight to the second fight in this short period of time to deal with Usyk. He says he's going to get meaner. He's going to sit on his punches more. Like, if that's your only adjustment, what happens if Usyk takes those punches flush early in the fight? Then you've got nothing. You're left with nothing. Joshua's not going to win on the cards against Usyk. He's got to knock him out. So if Usyk has that chin that we think he does, then Joshua just can't beat Usyk. And I don't think, I may be playing mind reader here. It's tough for me to think that Fury would want to deal with Usyk at this point in his career. I'm telling you, he don't want to fight that dude, and that's possible. That's possible. Or we could be reading too much into this, and the retirement talk is just leverage for more money. People begging him to come back for this Undisputed fight. And it could just be that. It could be that. But it just seems premature, the retirement talk. He also had Michael Spinks, Tim Witherspoon in his era. That's right. These guys, between Holmes and Fury, conditioning counts a lot too. Larry could go 15. Fury be gassed me for air in the 13. So even if you train for a 15-round fight, possibly. Which is better, being undisputed at heavyweight by beating Usyk, or being lineal at heavyweight by beating Vlad Klitschko? The Klitschko win was big. It was big. Becoming lineal and beating Klitschko was big. But here's the thing with Fury, with me, is the resume is still, it just seems thin. Okay? So you say it's thin, but there's something else on the table that could cap off his career. It's like Andre Ward, right? Andre Ward had a great Super 6 run. In a couple fights after that, you say that was a great 6 to 7 fight run. But then he had this period where he went dormant. And then after the period he went dormant, he fought 3 tune-ups. So you say, okay, if Ward finished his career that way, winning the Super 6 was big. He got some great wins against Kessler, against Froch. Great wins. But he's got to finish his career off with something else, because he's limping to the finish line right now. And then Kovalev fights him at 175, and then he wins that second fight definitively to cap off his career. So you say that win against Kovalev puts the exclamation point on Ward's career. So you want to see the same thing with Fury, right? He had this great lineal win. He also had a great trilogy. In my opinion, it was a great trilogy with Deontay Wilder. But there's something else out there. And it's Undisputed, and it's one fight away. When you're that close to Undisputed, And you're, by the way, going to make 40 plus million to fight it in front of almost 100,000 fans. And you leave that on the table? It's almost like Barry Sanders retiring in his prime when he's got records that he's about to break. It's like, man, yeah, he was great. Yeah, he was one of the best. But had he gone another 3-4 years, it would have been undeniable. So I want to see Tyson Fury finish off that book. I want to see him put that exclamation point on there. So what is better, Undisputed against Vlad Klitschko, or becoming, or Lineal against Vlad Klitschko, or becoming undisputed against, say, an Usyk? It's what and what, but both of those achievements in one career, that climbs you up those mythical all-time heavyweight rankings, which right now, to me, he's not top 10 all-time because he doesn't have a thick enough resume. So if you don't have that resume and you're only 33 fights into your career and you're still in your prime, to me, he's early 30s, 33, I believe, maybe 34. I want to see him fight that fight and put the exclamation point on his career. That's what I like to see. But which one is greater? The Vlad Klitschko win was great, but beating Usyk for all the marbles at Wembley, whew. Last time there was an undisputed champ, I was 9 years old. I believe it was 20 plus years ago. There ain't no Michael Spinks and Weatherspoons in this era. That is correct. Nobody's arguing against that. Past his prime, Vlad, Steve Cunningham, and Deontay Wilder are his best wins. That is true. He hasn't fought someone like Holmes who would box him and make it. And all this is true, man. Like, we all agree that this is historically the weakest heavyweight era of all time. We would all agree with that. But there are still good heavyweights out there. And you say there are still things that could quantify Fury as a great heavyweight all time. Whether you put him in the top 20, top 15, he's there. He's in that realm. I don't put him top 10 all time, but he's in that top 15, top 20 realm where he's the best of his era, a weak era. But he's done some things that you say, that's pretty special, and I can quantify that. Going 25 rounds with one of the biggest punchers of all time, taking those shots flush, and then beating him at his own game, that's special to me. Beating Vlad Klitschko, even though he was past his prime, and the way that he did it is special to me. And that's the thing, too, is Fury can morph himself into whatever he wants to be on that particular night because he's a versatile heavyweight. He can take advantage of your weakness like he did against Dillian Whyte by knocking him out with an uppercut. Or he can beat you at your own game by knocking out Deontay Wilder twice, bullying the bully, or he can go 12 rounds and outbox the masterclass boxer in Vlad Klitschko. Even though Klitschko is past his game at that point, he was still close enough to his prime to where it's a great victory. So I can quantify things. Like I can see stuff in Fury's career to where I can say that makes him a special heavyweight. That makes him an all-time great, whether you're putting him top 15, top 20 of all time. But in order to climb into that top 10, you got to give us more. You can't end the book a chapter premature. Undisputed's on the table. And you've got the money on the table. You've got almost 100,000 that you can fight in front of fans at Wembley Stadium. And you've got all the belts, the 4 major belts, plus the ring on the table. And you're going to walk away? You're going to walk away? Look, you're entitled to do whatever you want as a man. You just made $33 million in one night. I can't relate. I'm not one to tell a man when he can retire, when he should keep fighting. That's up to him and his family. I'm just speaking from a legacy standpoint. If you're out there saying that you're the greatest heavyweight of all time, you got to back that up. And if you walk away from Undisputed, you walk away from 40 million Undisputed in a huge atmosphere with everything on the table, 4 major belts and ring, and you walk away from it, how many great heavyweights would have done that? How many? I don't know of any. So legacy-wise, to me, that has to hurt him. I don't know. Hopefully he doesn't. Hopefully he doesn't step away though. He wouldn't be able to hit Tim, and Tim's overhand right would land clean. And once again, man, this is all fair stuff. These are all fair comments. These are all, when we talk mythical matchups, we don't know. We just don't know. Fury beat Wilder in his own game. He did. Wilder reminds me of Michael Grant. Only Grant had a guy like Lennox early in his career, where Wilder had Fury late. Fury is top 50 heavyweight. I think you're ranking him too low, like 50. 50. I'd have to put him at least top 25. I don't know. But we'll talk about this later because, maybe I'm missing a lot of heavyweights. So top 50 is safe for him. But I think we can put him higher than that. But we'll talk about that. But this has been the UpJab Podcast. I'm going to finish this here. I will be on the roundtable tonight with D-Style Boxing. I'm sure we'll talk more about this. I appreciate y'all tuning in. Like always, I appreciate all the comments and the new subscribers. Y'all be easy, man. See y'all tomorrow. God bless.